Hi, welcome to the 11th video in my series, Jesus Is, and we find an adjective or a character attribute in the book of Mark, verse by verse. This time, it's Jesus is teacher. He's a really great teacher, like brilliant teacher, multifaceted dimensions, go crazy teacher. I think it's easy, at least for me, probably for you, if you've been in the faith and reading the Bible for a number of years, for us to lose our appreciation for just how galvanizing and creative a teacher and effective a teacher Jesus actually was. Here in the book of Mark is just example after example. It's kind of like when we were teenagers or in our 20s. We have a favorite music LP, we called them, long play, whether it was on vinyl, CD, and nowadays teenagers stream everything, and some adults too, I've heard. But we would have a favorite record that we would call a masterpiece, and we listened to it about 7,201 times. And therein lies the problem. We listened to it so much, and maybe it was popular in the culture and was played on the radio and played at parties and everywhere you went, it was played. I had one like this that was in the late 80s. And it took me about 10 years or so of taking a break from that record because I was like, oh, I know that thing inside and out. It's like la-di-da. I'm sure it's pretty good, But then I downloaded it one time when a 25th anniversary deluxe edition came out. And I gave it a chance from A to Z again. Boom! I was blown away. This thing is a masterpiece. Every song, all tied together, so much melody and the singing and the bass playing and the orchestration was amazing. The lyrics even. I was like, it was all like a new revelation. And that's what I'm finding as I read the book of Mark. Passages I've read about Jesus many, many times or heard in messages and sermons or radio broadcasts are coming to life again, as if for the first time. And let's just, instead of telling you all this, let's do some showing here. In Mark chapter 1, verse 21, we've been here before, but for different reasons. Verse 21, we have the disciples in him. It says they went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. Now the people were amazed at his teaching, because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. This is big. Mark is telling us about how amazing Jesus is, but now look what Jesus is going to do. He's going to put some flesh and bones and action behind it. Just then a man in the synagogue, verse 23, who was possessed by an evil spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are. You're the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," said Jesus sternly. "Come out of him." The evil spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. Back to telling. The people were amazed that they asked each other. They were so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching? And with authority? He even gives orders to evil spirits and they obey him." Well, news about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. This is just one single example of how Jesus puts what is being said into action. He backs it up with a very visual, visceral action. He does it again here in chapter 3, verse 22. And he uses a lot of descriptive language, comparatives, contrast to get his point across. Verse 23, Jesus called them and spoke to them in parables, the disciples. "How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand. His end is come. And here's where he uses the parable, object lessons from daily life to make his point so well. In fact, no one can enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he can rob his house. I tell you the truth, all the sins and blasphemies of men will be forgiven them. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. He's guilty of eternal sin. So Jesus is using the comparison between talking about the abstract idea of a house being divided against itself. I've heard this in the news recently regarding how our country is going, kind of divided right now. But he's saying it's like a robbery. A person's house is being robbed and stuff's being taken away. And so how can that house stand, or how can that business continue if it's being robbed and split apart? So he does this on numerous occasions. It's one of his ways of teaching. Finally, we can go to chapter 4, verse 1. Again, Jesus began to teach by the lake. The crowd that gathered around him was so large that he had to get into a boat and sit in it out on the lake, while all the people were along the shore at the water's edge. He's in a very real life setting where he can point to lots of actual objects that are right before the people. Verse 3, we skip ahead. Listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it didn't have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants, so that they did not bear grain. And still other seed fell on good soil. It came up, grew, and produced a crop, multiplying 30, 60, or even 100 times. Now, he's already going crazy on the agricultural comparisons here. These people could see it all around them probably, and they definitely grew up in an agricultural situation, so they know what he was talking about. They may not have grasped all the spiritual implications, so then Jesus comes back in with more explanation. We go up to verse 14. The farmer sows the word. Some people are like seed along the path where the word is sown. As soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes away the word that was sown in them. Others, comparison, others, like seed sown on rocky places, hear the word, and at once they receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. More comparison, verse 18. Still others, like seed sown among thorns, they hear the word, but the worries of life, the deceitfulness of wealth, the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Finally, verse 20. Others, like seed sown on good soil, they hear the word, they accept it, and that produces a crop. 30, 60, even 100 times what was sown. So he's going to great lengths to show us, not with just propositional facts or abstract data or anything like that. He's putting it in terms that we live with and interact with all day long. Bottles of water. He talks about wineskins in another verse. All I have here laying around is a wine bottle. And he probably talks about lamps and lights on a stand. Yeah, next chapter. So he uses whatever object is around and he gets you right in the scene. So Jesus is an amazing teacher, and there's so much more that we could go on to. Finally, he's a foundational teacher. And what I mean by that is he refers back to the Old Testament quite often to reinforce his points that he's making. Just one single example of that would be chapter 9 we race up to in Mark, verse 2. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain, where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He didn't know what to say. They were so frightened. And Jesus, if we race up a little bit to verse 12, to be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son, and this is written in the Old Testament, written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wished, just as it was written about him. One example of many, many, many where he goes back to the Old Testament as kind of an attestation to say, see, the people you respect, the people you believe in, the Moses and the Abrahams and the Isaiahs and the Ezekiels and all these guys, I get that. I am fulfilling the prophecy. I'm putting the end on the beginning. I'm closing it up, tying up the loose ends here. And that's just another amazing thing about his teaching. If he was on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter now, he would probably drop in lots of little footnotes. Like, I'm backing up these assertions I'm making so you can know that they're standing on something strong and reliable. Well, this has been a very long video, but I'm so excited and enthusiastic to be rediscovering what a great teacher Jesus was, and I hope you will be too. Please hit like or dislike, criticize constructively, please. Subscribe, that'd be fun. I'd really like you to do that. And plus, you'll get these things automatically. We'll see you next time for when we discover that Jesus is, I haven't read anywhere beyond Mark 2:10 yet or something, so we'll find out tomorrow. Until then, bless you. Have a good one.